Easy, guys. I put my pants on, just like the rest of you, one leg at a time. Except, once my pants are on, I make gold records.
I've listened to it a number of times and it's still funny. This guy is funny no matter what he says. He could be reading a menu. But what I wanted to call out is, aside from the humour, that this is kind of what I think of our job as a record producer. So in consulting and in product development, we're making gold records every day. So come with me on that journey to make some gold records. So now I'm just going to talk about something that was requested. This symbol here, how it relates. I think it's becoming clear, but I want to call it out. It's not just a Zen piece. It's not a cultural matter. It's not about pie in the sky. This is a really practical thing. It's the idea of how the one half tucks in and neatly aligns with the other, how the two halves make the whole. So we've got problems on one side and solutions on the other, and we'll talk about that today. What's especially interesting is that little dot. In the white side, you've got a bit of black. In the black side, you've got a little bit of white. Really, really important to the conversation today. In particular, the designer's paradox. So this could equally be the service designer's paradox or the product manager's paradox, but we refer to it as designer's paradox. It very much describes the yin yang for me. So the first half of it is we can only think about solutions once we've understood problems. Sure, that sounds reasonable. So we think about problems first and we understand those, then we move on to solutions. That's the argument we're making in so much of this course. Don't jump into shiny solutions yet. But it's also true, it is also 100% true, and this is a bit of a mic drop, that we can only understand problems once we've thought about solutions. And so it sounds like a real backwards idea, but it's so true. And if you think about that yin yang, there are elements of that, the solution exploration, that help us better to define problems. And that's an important part of understanding how the two come together. So behind my head is the word stages, so product development cycle, major stages, and we're going to talk just briefly about how that symbol sort of expands and grows over time. So the initial phase, we've got problem and solution coming together. Must be a neat fit, can be at small scale, and we're largely focusing on qualitative validation and a low fidelity MVP. Then we move on to the idea of product market fit. At the core, we've got the nucleus. We've still got the problem solution fit there. But around it, we start to wrap the idea of product market fit. So there's more to be done, more to be understood. We're starting to think about quantitative validation and probably a more high fidelity MVP. But you would use the MVP or tool that suits the situation. And so we're wrapping around the core market and product. So the last piece is scale, and it doesn't wrap perfectly, but the same concept exists. We're now thinking about inside, we've got the nucleus of the problem solution fit, then we've got product market fit, and around that we're working out all the operational aspects and all the long-term planning and how we harvest a return from a business model that's viable and that's repeatable and scalable. So it kind of expands out that way. I'm hoping that makes sense to everyone. And so that should make a little bit more, explain a little bit more on what's going on in this graphic. Aside from the terrible visual design, no awards for me. But essentially, along each stage, there's a bunch of activities we do to get to problem solution fit, product market fit, and then scale. Some of those activities I should call out exist earlier and later in the process, but they really come to the fore where they're mentioned here. In order to increase our investment over time, we need to make sure our certainty increases. So that's why the activities are so important. So, just move my stupid head out of the way. So let's look at an example. We've got problem hypothesis, a problem solution fit. I can never find a cab when I need one. And the hypothesis being if customers could reliably schedule a ride from their phone, they would no longer hail a cab from the street. That sounds reasonable. It also sounds like some product you've probably used. So underneath that are a bunch of assumptions that must be true in order for that hypothesis to work and for that problem to be solved. So we call them out so that we're really, really clear about which assumptions we're relying on and how to manage that as we go forward. So one is that we've called out, there's 3 here, but there's probably many. We will be able to attract enough drivers to support demand. Reasonable assumption. Customers are annoyed by arbitrary cab fees. Pretty annoying. People would prefer to not hail a cab from the street, and I would agree with that. I'm in that basket for sure. So essentially, we've got a problem and a hypothesis. This is the articulation, our imagined product, and I should move myself back so I can talk with my hands. Imagined product or service at the top. Underneath that, we're relying on assumptions which are external to our controls. And then any of those assumptions could be broken by a risk. So we'll deal with risk later on in the course in the next couple of weeks. But essentially, under each of those assumptions, there are many, many risks that we either need to mitigate, understand better, prioritize in a different way, maybe reprioritize those assumptions or rewrite our hypothesis based on risks that we find and manage. So this kind of explains how problem, hypothesis, assumptions, and risks all relate. And as we move through the course, we'll break them down and hopefully come out at the end of it with a really intact product that deals with all of these aspects. And thanks for tuning in. Hope you join us for the next Product Bites.